Life can be harsh everywhere, but in the old world, there was no hope of it ever improving.
We've had games like Farthest Frontier before, people. That is, you take a load of rejects from society where no other town wants to house them, and you build a place for these rejects to live and thrive. So why is it then that Farthest Frontier is doing things differently? Well, my little Cockney gang, Farthest Frontier, even in early access, might just have the potential to be the best building management sim in years. So grab yourself a cup of tea and let's have a chat. So this is an early access review, but even still I'm impressed with Farthest Frontier. For me, it's a mashup of Frostpunk, Banished and a little bit of Farming Simulator thrown in, but more on that later. Farthest Frontier is set in medieval times, so your rejects don't just have to deal with building a town from scratch, but also contend with a time in history where disease, raiders, famine and the elements of the weather combine to make your rejects wish they were never born. Now, like all games of this nature, your first building to start with is a townhouse / town centre building, and from there you build things for your rejects to live, such as little ramshackle huts, and of course those people need to eat and keep warm, so from there you've got wood cutting facilities or a hunting hut to maim and kill little wild animals. The buildings therefore all interact with each other in some way, where you find one material to feed it into another so that you can build something more luxurious. I for one found I was eventually able to make soap for my smelly little reject town. That ensured their health was slightly increased, the dirty sods. In the building department there is nothing new or fundamentally different to write home about here. It just all works and it's all pretty simple to understand. Where Farthest Frontier does do things differently though, people, and it's in how it presents the passing of time. You see that little bar at the top of the screen there with those 12 little segments? Well, guess what? They represent each month and thus one Earth year, and everything feeds off this because the spring is a time to get your crops laid and recover from the harsh winter. Summer is a time when food is its most plentiful and where you start stashing resources away, and spring is that last scrappings of food and where the wood is cut just before winter begins. And winter, when that hits, your little rejects will bunker down into their huts, hoping that you've stored there enough food and water and firewood to keep warm. And the passing of time affects everything, in particular the food. You see, back in the olden days, food would rot quicker than Reggie last in bed, and so you need to ensure you've got yourself things like a smokehouse to prolong the life of your meat. That's what she said, that's what she said, and that's what she said. And it gets even more intricate, people, because whilst farming can provide plentiful food, you've got to ensure it's farmed correctly. Maybe some crops are heat resistant, some are frost resistant, or some crops provide more fertility or less fertility. It's that little fertility which ensures how bountiful your yield will be. It's a very intricate part of the game that really makes you think how best to maximise food. 3 farms rotating 3 different crops over 3 years means you could in theory have a continuous crop every single year. But it gets better still because there's always these little issues to deal with other than lack of food. There will be times when raiders come into your lovely little reject shrine and steal your limited food or gold, and so a quick ring of the town bell hides your little rejects away, and their hope is that the lookout towers you placed around the gaff will be able to dispatch the raiders with ease. The same can be said with bear or wolves. They might wander into your lands and have some villagers for lunch. There are also other issues to deal with here, such as crop disease destroying your yields for the year, leaving your rejects dying, or the spread of fire from a lightning strike. Now, to be clear, this is not a game like Age of Empires where you're building up a town to fight droves of the enemy where they have their own base. It's more just sporadic little attacks from an unknown location, because the focus here is very much about driving a self-sustaining society. So everything I've just mentioned there is wonderful. It's amazing how many hours pass as you work your way through all these little challenges, and whilst it can still feel stressful at times, it also can feel very relaxing too. So the high praise this game has been getting is well deserved, but as with all early access games, it does have some major issues. The first one that I found was the lack of varied resources across the map. For example, I needed some herbs, and for the life of me I could not find one area to find them. I explored the whole bloody map, but nothing came to be. So the only way I could grab myself some of these bloody herbs was to buy them off a trader that comes to your little reject town once a year. However, when the trader comes to town, they won't always carry herbs, and sometimes they might only want to buy herbs off you. So you could be waiting literally years for your ability to buy the bloody things. And why is that so important, you might ask? Well, to get your little huts upgraded, it requires that the house has access to herbs. And so your game grinds to a bloody halt as this one little resource with your whole economy. Secondly, there's those raiders that I mentioned. Now eventually they do very little to you as your walls and lookout towers are secured in place, and so there's very little challenge from them. They need to make this far more gut-wrenching, perhaps where they also set light to a load of buildings and massacre whole rafts of rejects along their way. Now we don't want this game to be about armies and battles, of course, but it would be good to have perhaps a small campsite from where they spawn, where you could take out to alleviate the problem every couple of years or something. I don't know. The same could be said with the fires. It just doesn't hurt the town as much as it should, considering how much wood there is on offer for it. However, one of the biggest issues I came across was the UI, or should I say more its lack of education around it. I spent literally years grinding away with resources, and I just for the life of me could not work out why my bloody rejects weren't cutting up enough firewood for the winter, even though I have woodcutter huts everywhere. Well, it turns out Reggie here needed to hit that tiny little icon right at the top of the bloody screen, where I could then allocate my rejects into all sorts of different fields of work, which really made the game become so much clearer for me. Once I shoved a load of them into my labour workforce, the town started to hum along nicely. The other issue with the UI I sometimes had was around the building and just a lack of clarity. I'd love to have clicked on a building and visually see what materials it needed and what output it was going to make. So there are problems here, people, but they are all fixable, and if worked on, they could make this game something truly special. But talking of special, let's discuss the graphics, shall we? Because it is simply wonderful. It's drawn in such a way that it goes for that more realistic look, unlike other city town style management games that sometimes come across, I think, a little bit bland or a little bit cartoony. What is most impressive are the seasons. You see, they didn't just give us the challenge of those 12 months to contend with and call it a day, but instead they bring that to life through the actual world. You'll see it continually change as time passes, with snow, dust in the winter months, or rain coming through in the spring showers. In particular, I had the little particle effects of leaves falling in autumn. The animations are great too, as rejects go about their place hunting animals or chopping up wood, and the detail is there too, where you can see individual stones on walls or little blood stains on the floor from a hunt. If there was one thing I would change, is that some of the buildings look a bit samey, and so it can be difficult knowing what you've built and where as well. But that is the payoff for realism, I'd say, as what they've pulled off here is just a lovely little world that is baked in the medieval era, and the immersion because of that is top notch. As for sound, it's like an ASMR wet dream orgy as your eardrums just mellow out and relax to the ambient sounds on offer. I absolutely love the way the developers have really focused on the sound effects here, and not just the musical score, which by the way is fantastic, but those ambient sounds add so much to the overall immersion. You'll hear the little metal axes as one of your rejects chops up the logs to firewood, or the wind whistle and blow across your lands, or how rain patters down on the farmlands. Yes, Cockney gang, it really is superb. Now I tell you what all this ambient sound and glorious music reminds me of, should I? It reminds me of that film The Village. It feels like you're making that town, and it has such a similar style that I'm here for it. No complaints on the sound department. In fact, it's one of the standout areas of the game. So, early access, we have to call out things that are wrong. They are charging money, but also know there is much time for improvement. And yes, it does need improving, people, but there is definitely something magical here, something where you can all see the ingredients combining together to create an addictive, beautiful and realised world that's going to leave you wanting more and more and more. If you have any kind of interest in these types of games, then absolutely give it a go. You too will love giving your rejects a place of worth. And until next time, gang, have a lovely day out. Reggie out.